Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into something deeply relatable, yet honestly, so often completely misunderstood. We are unpacking the exact mechanics of exhaustion, specifically looking at individuals operating in the developmental disorder gray zone. I mean, if you've ever felt like you're constantly running on a treadmill just to keep up with the totally normal walking pace of the world around you, this analysis of our source text is going to be incredibly illuminating for you. We're going to break down exactly what happens when we constantly push past our natural limits, and more importantly, how to spot the warning signs way before a total collapse. So, take a deep breath, settle in, and let's get started.
So picture this. Have you ever had one of those moments where life is seemingly humming along just fine, and then out of nowhere, everything just crashes? You drop a spoon in the kitchen, or you miss one totally minor email, and suddenly a dozen other problems just cascade all at once. It feels terrifyingly abrupt, right? You're left standing there asking yourself, why did this happen so suddenly? I mean, I was literally fine yesterday. It is a completely overwhelming feeling, and if you've been there, I really want you to know you are absolutely not alone in feeling blindsided by it.
But here's the really fascinating truth from the text that challenges that whole feeling of suddenness. When something breaks, it is almost never sudden. Sure, the collapse might look like it happened overnight, but the foundation, that was actually cracking for a very long time. And this is absolutely crucial to understand, because it takes away that heavy stigma of a sudden personal failure. You didn't just break without warning, there was a buildup.
Let's dive into how this actually works. Think of it like a domino effect. It starts completely invisibly with step 1, unresolved fatigue. You're exhausted, but hey, you just keep moving. That leads straight into step 2, ignored emotions. You feel overwhelmed or frustrated, but you push all of that aside because, well, you just have to get things done, right? This builds up an immense amount of hidden internal pressure. Eventually, you just don't have the energy to do things properly anymore, bringing us to step 3, you start cutting corners. Mistakes quietly pile up in the background. And then, finally, step 4 arrives, the trigger. It could be an unexpected text message or a tiny error. That trigger taps the first domino, and because of all that invisible pressure from the first 3 steps, the entire line just collapses all at once.
Section 1. The brute force trap. Operating on empty.
In Japanese, the source uses this really specific term, chikarawaza, which basically translates to brute force. You see, for individuals in the gray zone, everyday daily tasks, like organizing a really complex schedule or even just navigating a loud, crowded grocery store, they just don't happen automatically. So to keep up, they rely on brute force. They spend massive, totally unsustainable amounts of mental and physical energy to accomplish things that neurotypical folks might just do naturally, without a second thought. It's exactly like driving a car in first gear on the highway. I mean, sure, you are technically moving forward, but you are absolutely destroying your engine to do it. And the text points out a seriously dangerous psychological trap here. People start telling themselves, I have to do it this way. So when things inevitably go wrong, they don't blame the high-friction incompatible method they're using. No, instead, they look inward. They interpret the failure as a lack of personal ability. They think, I'm just not trying hard enough. And what does that do? It makes them push even harder, applying even more brute force, and draining those already empty reserves right down to nothing.
Section 2. Ignoring the warning signs. The burden of shogunai.
Look, the body always keeps the score, and eventually it's going to start actively rejecting this constant overdrive. The text outlines some very concrete warning signs. First is brain fog, finding yourself just staring at a wall with empty, spacey eyes, completely unable to focus. Second, a sudden, really sharp irritability over minor things that literally wouldn't usually bother you at all. And third, a profound physical heaviness, like a literal resistance in your muscles when you try to move forward. These are not just bad moods. The source really stresses this. These are genuine, physical, red alert signals that your capacity has hit its absolute limit.
But here is where things get really tricky. When faced with these intense warning signs, the knee-jerk reaction for so many of us is to say, shogunai. It's a Japanese phrase that means it can't be helped. You basically convince yourself you have absolutely no choice but to power through. But the text explains that by burying these red alerts with dismissive little phrases, you aren't actually fixing the problem. You are essentially just slamming a heavy lid onto a fiercely boiling pot. You're creating this dangerous, highly pressurized backlog of unprocessed emotion and pure exhaustion. Honestly, that act of dismissal, that is exactly what sets up that very first domino in the line of collapse.
Section 3. The trial and error pain. Why fixing it hurts.
And when you get burnt out, people love to tell you,
Just find a method that works for you. Sounds super simple, right? Well, the text validates a really profound struggle here. For many folks in the gray zone, trial and error is actually deeply, deeply uncomfortable. You try something, it totally fails. You pivot and try something else. And instead of feeling like you're making progress, this constant shifting creates a severe sense of instability. It literally feels like you are stepping backwards, and that triggers an intense, almost unbearable discomfort.
The source text offers a really fascinating psychological explanation for why this happens. It reports that this intense resistance to trial and error is actually rooted in real differences in sensory processing. On top of that, it comes from the past trauma of constantly being forced to fit into a normal mold that never actually suited them. Think about it. When you've spent your entire life fighting tooth and nail to fit a specific mold, abandoning your hard-earned brute force coping mechanism feels terrifying. This is huge because it totally removes the stigma. This isn't weakness, it's not a lack of willpower, it is a completely valid, documented response to sensory differences in history.
Section 4. From doing to feeling. A gentle pivot. So what do? The text definitely isn't suggesting you can just drop all your responsibilities overnight. Obviously, the laundry still has to get done. But let's look at the contrast here. The old way, you do the task and you completely bury the emotion. You tell yourself it can't be helped, totally suppressing how exhausted you are. Now consider the new way. You still do the task, but you untangle the action from the emotional suppression. You actually allow yourself to out loud acknowledge, wow, this is really, really hard for me. Or, man, I absolutely hate doing it this way. You aren't quitting the task, you are just quitting the suppression.
The core takeaway here is just so profound. By simply acknowledging these small negative feelings, by just admitting to yourself that a task was exhausting or incredibly uncomfortable, you actually process the emotion in real time. You stop putting that lid on the boiling pot. By just validating your own struggle, you stop those invisible dominoes from ever stacking up in the background in the first place. You stop forcing yourself emotionally into a mold. And according to the text, that is the exact moment you finally begin to move forward in a sustainable way.
Section 5. The true shortcut. Reallocating energy.
Let's be clear. When you finally decide to step away from using brute force to do things the normal way, you are not giving up. The text frames this so beautifully. You are simply reallocating your energy. Brute force drains everything you have. But by finding methods that actually work with your natural processing style rather than fighting against it, you suddenly free up a monumental amount of energy. All that energy that used to be wasted on just forcing yourself to appear normal can finally be used for rest, for reflection, and for actually leaning into your unique strengths. I want to leave you with this really vital question from the source material. Yes, we know the trial and error phase of finding your own way is messy, it's wildly uncomfortable, and it feels super inefficient. But compared to the absolute 100% certainty of the domino collapse, the burnout, the brain fog, the ultimate crash, is it really a detour? The text suggests that finding your own method isn't stepping backwards at all. It's actually the only true shortcut to lasting stability and peace. Definitely something to chew on the next time you catch yourself sighing and saying, well, it can't be helped. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the process.